Welcome back to another episode here on the Enneagram at Work podcast. Today, we are going to take a look at, kind of the state of the Enneagram, what's going on in the Enneagram community, and to help us understand what's going on, where I'm going to bring in one of our here at Enneagram MBA facilitators, and who owns his own leadership team development company. Demetrius Parker, you have heard from him before. I think this is maybe your second time, maybe third, or maybe it just feels
Yep, second time,
like
second
it.
time.
Okay. On the show. So welcome back.
Thank you, thank you. Good.
And we have actually been talking about doing some future episodes together. So that'll be fun. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. But today I wanted to bring him on because Dee was just out in Minnesota at the International Enneagram Association annual conference. I think it's annual. And he is going, I have some questions for him that I wanted to get answered for myself and for our listeners. And so thank you for being here, Dee.
Yeah, no. And just really quickly, two things. One, I think they actually do their conference every other year. Because I
Okay,
think,
as I was saying that, I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I
I
don't
think
know
they
if
do it
that's
every
right.
other year because what they try to do is give they want to have the international conference every other year, and then that off year they want to give the chapters an opportunity to do a conference if they want and
Okay,
not compete with each other.
okay,
So
okay. Well, and I wanted to do this just to kind of see, well, what is going on beyond just, what Sarah does or what we do at Enneagram MBA. What's everybody else talking about? And then I know that we have several people who listen. Um, some of them will come up to me after a workshop and say, hey, I want to do more. I want to get more involved in the Enneagram community, either potentially switching careers or just maybe as a fun hobby. So I think that this will be really interesting and beneficial for our listeners. So one thing that I thought was interesting that you had said, and this was your first time going, so we're getting
yes,
kind of a very fresh perspective.
it's perspective.
And you had said that they had kind of positioned it more as an experience than a conference, which I love because when we talk about our workshops, that's kind of how we position them too. So what kind of, why do you think they framed it that way? And how did that kind of make it different than just saying it was a conference?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say probably when you think about doing conferences, and I've had to help to put conferences together before, themes. You think about themes. And so for me, that means they came in with an intentionality to make it more than just a conference, right? To make, the experience feel so much more. And I think it was from the very beginning, like you know, they had poetry there, which is not something that you typically see at a conference, and unless it's a poetry conference.
Yeah.
And so I think it's Joe Davis, that was there and sharing his poetry. And not only that, but then, they had live music and they had yoga and they had you know, an after hours session on the Enneagram, of how to, look at the Enneagram from an intimate uh perspective. Russ Hudson, who is, one of the founders of IEA, he DJ'd the gala.
Oh my gosh.
He DJ'd the gala, um, dance party. And it was a party. Like it was, a bunch of different folks from all over the spectrum in this space having a great time. So it was literally, I can say it was an experience. And
Oh,
especially for someone who, with my energy level, that's what I'm looking for. And so I would say from that perspective, it 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 met and probably even went a bit above expectations of what I thought a Enneagram Conference was going to be.
Well, and you know what, what's so fun about that is that that's how I see the Enneagram the way that we use it at Enneagram MBA is obviously a very specific use of it in the workplace. But I know so many practitioners who use it for yoga retreats, or I know Sleeping Out Last. They do kind of songs and poetry and use the nine types to describe. They use poetry or songs to describe the nine types. Have you heard of them
Yes.
before? Okay, that people will always say their type song made them cry. So if you haven't heard of Sleeping at Last, that would be like fun, and you know your type, that would be fun to listen to. And then when you said the intimacy one, Enneagram After Dark or whatever, we had one of my very first guests 3+ years ago was Anne Gadd, who wrote
Mm.
the book Sex and the Enneagram. So, I mean, there are literally all different kinds of ways people are infusing the Enneagram into these different things. So that's kind of cool. It's like a buffet of all the
A
ways.
buffet. Sure.
Yes. So fun. Okay, so um one of the things that people will ask during a workshop or after a workshop is, okay, well, this is really fun. What book should I read? Or what we want to give our team gifts. What book should we read? And a lot of the authors of the books that I recommend were at the conference, which makes sense. Who were some of your, if we'll say Enneagram celebrity sightings, and
Well,
and
oh,
and give us kind
sightings.
of the
Oh, wow.
scoop.
So yeah, wow. When you say sightings, to your point, so many of the authors were there. Um, sharing their books, sharing their thoughts, sharing their advice, sharing. Again, it was an experience. Um, I would say there were a few that I got to personally connect with, which was awesome. Russ Hudson, Suzanne Stabile, Anne Marie, of course, our friend and teacher Mario Sikora.
Yes.
So got to like literally just chat with them. Patrick O'Leary,
Yes.
um, which was very interesting. That's my first time. Actually, it's my first time meeting all of them except for Mario. And again, they were personable, interactive, and so it was just great to just talk about the Enneagram from their perspectives, and especially someone like Russ, who again is the founder of the IEA, or one of the founders, right? One of the founders of IEA, and hearing his thoughts around how the Enneagram is growing and what that
Mm,
community is looking like. Um, and having some emotionality around that. Um, and so that was, really good because it's one of those things where, he was sharing his story of when he was first introduced to this space and what it looked like at that time and how much it's grown. And again, like in anything, there's some really good growth and then
mhm,
there's some growth that's questionable. But the majority of it is good, right? The majority of it is good. And the fact that to what we were just speaking about, which is it's in so many different spaces. There's so many different ways to navigate this tool and not only navigate, but integrate this tool
mm,
into our lives, right? And be able to say, and not make it, as Mario says, right? Not make it the topic of I am X, but I have the strategy of, right? I've adapted the strategy of whatever number it is, and just understanding and diving into, instincts and all the other different areas of the Enneagram is what I would call them for now.
Was there anything that stood out to you about what Russ was saying, how the Enneagram has evolved for the better and potentially just some, I don't know, questionable growth?
Yeah, I would say, with that, and I'm not quoting him, but to paraphrase just some of the thoughts that he had was, the fact that, again, that the community has grown so much. When you think about, how many folks that went to that first school, at that college and took on that. And then folks left that space feeling energized and empowered to then take that. And it's almost kind of like, hey, I heard the word up on the mountain and now I'm taking it out to the people kind of thing, right? And how many people felt that calling
Mm-hmm.
to do that? And again, just like everything else, it then is grown and it's has transformed in different ways. And to me, that's what happens with a lot of um tools and resources that are out there, right? Is that to me, if they stay stagnant, it's like, oh, this, I try to stay away from what I call and um I don't want to take any copyright away from Star Wars, but I call it the Mandalorian, which is this is the way, right? The Mandalorians are like, this is the way. And I try to stay away from those things that say this is the way. It's multiple ways. And the foundation has stayed the same. The foundation has stayed the same, and at the same time, it's grown. And it's grown in a way that folks can embrace it and feel comfortable where they are um, in those spaces. And of course, as a leadership facilitator, I'm hoping that those same people who feel comfortable also leave room for growth and have that growth mindset to say, okay, what's next? And I think that's kind of what Russ was sharing, um, which is what is that next space? And at the same time, do your homework. So I think it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like two things, right? So that's where it went to kind of the dark side of things, where things are growing and not such a positive way, which is, don't read a book or go to a workshop or read one book and then be like, oh yeah, I know this.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna go
got
out and
it.
like I got it. Yeah, don't do that, right? And so that's what Russ was talking about, and you know, a lot of the other folks that were there, they were sharing their stories of how they studied for years before they started teaching, facilitating
Hmm.
any type of workshop. Um, and so that was great to hear folks saying, look, that's what this looks like. And then understanding that there are so many different aspects to this that you have to do more research and you have to do more learning before you start teaching it. Now, to
Hmm.
embrace it and bring it into your life, that's a little different, right? You can read a book and say, hey, I like this thing. I want to incorporate that, right? I want to integrate that into my daily living. Um, and at the same time, being open to possibly changing your mind. And that's
Hmm.
that intelligence, right? That's the intelligence that we hope that people have, uh, which is I hear something different. I want to look at that and then see if I want to apply it to my life or not.
Well, on that point, and then I want to go back to one more thing that you said. I know that we're both in agreement on this that sometimes it is easy to get caught up in the Enneagram and make everything through the lens of the Enneagram. And also, as a facilitator, we have to be very careful because we are obsessed a little bit with it, to not try and make our clients, the workshop attendees, conference attendees, Enneagram experts. And I have made that mistake, being very honest. In my first, teaching of the Enneagram, it's like I had 200 slide decks and I was no participation. I just want to share all of this with you, every single piece of the Enneagram in a half day. Let's go. Um, and you start to realize, okay, it's not about the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a tool or a path to help you get to where you want to go. So it's not about becoming an expert on the Enneagram. It's about using the Enneagram to help you become an expert on yourself and
Yes,
your relationships. And there's lots of tools. We were just talking about therapy before this. There's like therapy, there's other modalities, there's other things. The Enneagram is a powerful tool. I'm sure we're both a little biased, but I love that message about just holding it kind of loosely and using it as a tool rather than how you see everything through.
exactly, exactly.
Uh, and then the other thing, if you have anything else to add to this, because I know I did a better introduction. I did a more proper introduction on our first interview. So I was talking, I was like, man, I should have introduced him better. So maybe I'll go back and do that better. But D also does his own. He has his own Trust Collective leadership uh, coaching and training business, and so we both work in the professional space. And I thought it was interesting to hear Russ just kind of validate how the Enneagram is growing and people are being more open to it. You're seeing it pop up in other places. And I think in the professional environment, that's one of the bigger places that I've seen that growth because I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know. People probably thought of it as like astrology or some sort of like mystic
Well, yeah.
training,
I mean,
and
when you
very
think about,
credible groups are using it now. Go ahead,
oh
sorry.
yeah, no, no, oh no, no, exactly what you just saying. I mean, when it, you know, a lot of those folks that were introduced to this were coming from a space of theology and spirituality and those types of things. Um, and so yes, for a while it was kind of looked at as woo-woo. And now I tell people, let's go from woo-hoo to woo-hoo and let's get excited about let's get excited about how it can actually help us. And especially when I work with leaders and teams, how can it help us be better leaders? How can it help us have better teams, which then typically translates into our personal lives? Because if we show up better at work, then we can show up better at home and vice versa. We show up better at home, we show up better at work. And so I think that's where when I work with people, they even share that. They're like, wow, what you just shared, to your point, you shared it in a way that I could take that bit, I could apply it to work, and then I realized, ooh, I also could apply this at home. And home could be as small or broad as you want that to be. But yeah, that's one of the things I think Russ was talking about, and that's one of the things that I took away from that conference is that there was a spectrum of how people were using the Enneagram, what that looked like. And so you felt at home no matter where you were, where you come
Mm.
from the spiritual space, if you were coming from the business space, if you're coming from the personal space, if you're coming from the relationship space, it didn't matter. There was something there for every.
I love that. Now, if you're okay sharing, and you can just kind of share generally
Yeah.
if you can't get specific, but I just want to underscore this for our listeners who maybe haven't gone through one of our workshops. The type of groups that are open to this, just to your point, we've worked with a group of physicians, steeped very much into the science research community who have embraced the Enneagram. And to your point, many of them came up to me after a workshop and said, oh my God, I can't wait to take this back to my wife or my husband or my mom. Oh my God, I understand my dad so much better, or my sister. So that's really cool when that happens. But then Dee has also led a leadership workshop with for us recently with the subsidiary company from Foot Locker, WSS, and their executive leadership team. What are some of the other organizations that maybe you wouldn't, or industries, types of groups that you have brought the Enneagram to that maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago might have thought, oh, this is woo woo?
Well, I'm gonna tell you one industry as a whole that I've done a lot of work with this with the Enneagram, which is local government, uh, which a lot of folks would not think,
No.
local government. And I do a lot of work in the local government space, um, where folks are embracing it and going, wow. And leaders have said, "Oh my goodness, this makes so much more sense to why." And when you think about boards and commissions and elected officials, and you think about these people who are elected from different spaces, and they're coming in to represent, a community, and they're not friends or any of those things in the beginning. They didn't, and they were elected, and then they get to work together. And so when they sit there and start to understand each other and understand not only the things that they're trying to get past for their community, but then they understanding the person behind that and how they can better work together and collaborate versus just cooperate.
Oh,
Um,
love that.
and so
Um,
go ahead.
well, I something that I wanted just to underscore with the government agencies, I just saw that I looked it up while you were sharing to make sure I got it right. I just saw a military group out of London is spending $100,000. They have $100,000 contract with Integrative Enneagram Solutions, which I think that's Integrative Nine.
Probably,
Um,
probably yes.
yeah, because they're out of London,
Yep.
and the article is about how the military is spending $100,000 on the personality, emotional intelligence. So to your point, it's showing up. People are embracing it and using it in all kinds of things. And I don't think the military is an industry that I'm like, oh yeah, they're doing the
No,
Enneagram.
exactly. Well, no, because so as a veteran, I will tell you,
Yes,
um,
yeah, you got
yeah,
firsthand
right. As
experience.
a
Yes.
veteran, if you don't have self-awareness is one of the things that we talk about. Because if you don't understand yourself, it's going to be very hard for you to lead other people. Um, and I did not have the Enneagram back when I was serving in the military. And although I had some other tools, I will tell you the Enneagram would probably have been a great tool to have back then. Um, for all of us, right? Because yes, one person can understand it, but when you're working with teams that have something where everyone can understand where the other person's coming from, is so much more powerful in that respect, and having even the language. So even if you don't necessarily agree, to be able to have a shared language around
Yeah.
how you communicate, it makes it easier to navigate conflicts.
Yes. Yes. I know I kind of cut you off
Oh
to
yeah,
share
no, no,
that.
no.
Was there anything else that you wanted to add to
I
that?
can always add so much. So no, just
Okay,
go
okay.
and
Okay,
whatever other person you have.
I told you before we started because we were going to talk about some other projects we might be getting into, and I just felt like I kept interrupting, and I was like, I'm just excited to talk to somebody today. So, yeah, this is my outlet today. So, but okay, so we're talking about the different uses. We talked about Russ. The other person, kind of Enneagram celebrity that I wanted to ask you about. I think you had mentioned you talked to her was Suzanne Stabile.
Yes.
She, just for our listeners and those of you who have done a workshop with us, I've talked about her in her podcast interview that she did with Glennon Doyle. We Can Do Hard Things. There's an excellent two-part interview with Suzanne on that show that is a great starting point or just a really interesting listen. So I always love hearing Suzanne talk. So I would recommend that. I'll link that in the show notes. But what was that interaction like? Like, what was she there to share? What was your conversation like? Give us the scoop.
Yeah, no. So she now I know why they call her the Enneagram Godmother.
Godmother, yes.
Um, because it was also her energy. So, and you know me, I'm an energy person.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so her energy was fantastic. Um, just and she was one also who shared about her journey of not teaching the Enneagram until she would, really took it in, and she has a fantastic story. Her husband, was, again, when we talk about theology, was in that whole space. And then, when she was introduced to the Enneagram, and I think her and her husband were introduced at the same time, you know, it was told to her, hey, go study this before you and I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it was actually a pretty decent amount of time that they were like, before you can share anything about this, you need to do this first, right? Um, and so anyway, but she just magnetic, um, ball of energy, and she shares things like it is.
Mhm.
So you don't have to guess what she's thinking because if she's thinking it, she's probably going to say it at some point. And she may say it in a very uh professional way, or she
Or
may say it
just
in a, hey, here it is, and again, not disrespectful, but just here it is, and I like that.
Well, and she's a type two, right? Or she's shared that she's a type two, I
Yes,
think. And I always love that as an example because I think sometimes when you read about a type two, they're like very docile and just, very people pleasing. And while sometimes that very well may be true, you're right that anytime Suzanne is share that I hear her share about it, she is very direct and she's funny and
yes,
she's not necessarily sandwiching everything, and so I just think that that's a really great example of another type of two that you may not see in some of the Instagram memes that you're seeing on social media.
exactly. Well, we're so much more than those memes. And just to tap on that, two things. Twos, first of all, remember twos are connected to eight.
Yes, the highway to
So,
eight. Many will talk about that
right,
highway to
right, they have that highway
eight.
to eight. So and I'm married to someone who has
You
that
were
two
just
shot,
yes.
and I will tell you now, docile is not a word that ever comes up.
Yeah, twos can be very. I feel like we need to do. Yeah, sometime I think it'd be fun to do like a misconception show, myths
Yes,
and misconceptions, because
mhm.
yeah, many twos are very direct and not at all docile. So I think that just sometimes people get that in their head, or at least the people that I talk to, and think, oh, I
Well,
can't be
because
a two because I'm too direct or whatever.
exactly, and well, because you hear that term where they're helpful and all
Uh-huh,
those things.
yeah, the helper. Mm-hmm.
To be a helper, you must be docile.
Mm-hmm.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, a lot of eights are actually helpful, but
Right.
it's intense help.
We
Um,
talk about, don't take advice from a type two and see what happens to you.
because it's not advice. Like, you would get me in trouble. We're not going on that road.
But we'll stay away from that. Okay,
We're thinking
getting to
that.
too close. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, Suzanne, and then I have to ask because we haven't talked about it, and I'm always talking about Mario Sikora, who is the kind of the founder of the awareness to action Enneagram approach, which is what we mostly use here. He was there. He gave a session, I believe. Is there anything new or anything that he really leaned into that you think would be interesting for us?
New.
Okay.
Trying to think that word new. I don't know about new as far as for us, right? Because you think about we're reading his books, we're listening to his podcasts.
Yeah,
You know,
we're
it's one
hearing
of
a
those
lot
things
from
where,
him.
you know, I will say what I got from Mario's, and I'm just gonna be candid here. I love the conference, right? Love the conference, love the conference. And at the same time, you know, there were some great sessions, and then there were some sessions that weren't for me.
Yeah.
Oh, right. There was a session that weren't for me. And at the same time that, and I'll share this because it might kind of answer so to your question. At the same time that Mario was having his session, um, there was another session that was going on that was also talking about instincts.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, you know what? I studied with Mario, and I started
Yeah.
in Mario's session, and the other session was like right next door, or a couple doors down. And I was like, well, you know what? I know Mario. Actually, it was right next door because I'll share this because I was like, you know what? I know Mario's. I've been here, and I was like, I'm gonna go ahead next door and hear what they have to say.
Mhm.
While I was in there, a totally different approach of how this presenter presented. Remember I told you, well, I don't have to tell you, you know me. I'm all about energy and engagement, and this was not energy or engagement.
Wasn't it for you? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and I'm sitting next door and I can hear all the laughter that's happening
Oh,
in Mario's session. And I'm next door like,
I left
like I'm
too
having
soon.
FOMO. I'm having FOMO. Because I'm like, I should be over there. And so what I will say is the approach that Mario brings, to sharing the Enneagram from his perspective is engaging, is still, I heard other folks talking about it afterwards, and I was like, hey, just it's engaging, it's informational. So you walk away with information that you can use. So it's very pragmatic, which is something else that I love, right? I love being
Yeah.
able to take something and put it into practice right away. And so that's what I heard folks saying, like, wow, I actually have something that I can put into play right now. So that plug and play kind of mentality. Um, so that's what I would probably share with that is that from what I heard, because I decided to take step out and I look at that
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
learning experience.
Hmm.
What works for me and what doesn't. Um, but yeah, it was that's what I would say that I got from that session is that folks still felt like they can laugh and learn. And I think that's
Hmm.
important as
Yeah.
humans is that we can have fun while we learn, and it doesn't have to be this very stale, stagnant kind of a space, which I think sometimes also people thought about with the Enneagram, that it's
Hmm. Very
it's
serious. Yeah.
very serious, very heavy.
Hmm.
And although there are some spaces that it can be, um, it's not it has to be, and that's not the way it's always presented. And so that's what I would share about that. If I came close to answering your question.
Well, and I think that is important because a lot of times we may only have 3 or 4 hours with a group, and so the last thing we want to do is make it really heavy and complicated so that they feel like, oh, I can't touch this again. It's too much, and so I love the cheeky humor that Mario has. And what Dee is talking about, for those of you who aren't as familiar with Mario's approach, is one of his key differentiators is the way that he talks about what he calls the instinctual biases. So that's kind of it. And there ends up being kind of three flavors of each of the types. And the way that he talks about it and has approached it is it's just a really great it's a really great approach, especially for a professional environment. Whereas, the other approaches use terms that just like sexual subtype. It's just not most groups. I had to wipe that out in the past when I was using it. They're like, can you you not use this word? So then we would use one to one, and then, so I really love the way that he talks about it, and it's such a rich, just deeper insight. People love to learn about the 9 types, and then you add this on, and it's really great. And Mario, I'm obviously biased, but he is the best at that. And then I know he's doing a lot of stuff around critical thinking, and thinking well. And I think that's really important, just with the current climate we're in, politically, just everything. And then even using it to think about types and the Enneagram and how to use it. And so I really appreciate that. Any other Enneagram
No, well,
interactions?
while you're talking about that, and again, I'm not keeping in mind that we're not the type. Right? That's one of the things. And again, I don't know, I wouldn't say that's new. Mario's always had that mindset, as have I. Like, you're not the type. It's a strategy that you've learned, um, and or adapted. And so just keeping that in mind, right? Which means there's to that critical thinking piece that once you have the awareness, you can decide how you want to show up and what is that going to look like, right? And some of those strategies are probably still going to be in play. However, they don't have to dominate.
Mm-hmm.
And go into that adaptive maladaptive mindset.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why they don't, and therefore we don't always use names for the types. And I picked that up from the way that he teaches, although he does have leadership styles, and I will use that in different workshops, because people still love a good a good title. But that it's so easy to say, oh, the achiever. Oh yeah, I want to be the achiever, or the helper. No, I don't really help a lot, so I'm not the helper. But the way that he really talks about it is more of like what you do and a strategy, and that's hard to make it just a single word. And that does require a little bit more thinking, deeper self-reflection on, oh, I'm actually striving to feel connected. I'm helping because I actually want to be connected. I want to feel connected. And, that just takes a little bit more, I don't know. I guess it is thinking
Oh,
to, yeah,
intentionality. Kind of what we started with in the very beginning about this is what's the intentionality around it?
yeah,
Why am I doing it, right? What's the motivation? One of the things that I love about the Enneagram versus, and one of the things in Trust Leadership Collective is, you know, everything is from a foundation of awareness. And so I use multiple different assessments besides the Enneagram. But one of the things that I love about the Enneagram is that it goes beyond the behavior so many
yeah.
times. And so I would share that with anyone who's, um, whether you're a facilitator of the Enneagram or just someone who's trying to embrace the Enneagram. It's so much more than your behavior, right? It's looking at what's the motivation behind it and why are we doing those behaviors? Because we can have the same behaviors all the time. And I use the analogy of we all could be drinking water, but we're drinking water for different reasons. Someone's drinking water because they're thirsty. Someone's drinking water because, the doctor told them they have to drink more water. Someone's drinking water because,
They don't
you
want to
know,
get wrinkles,
they
drinking
don't
more
want to get
water.
wrinkles, right?
Stay
And then
hydrated.
someone's drinking water because everybody else is drinking water and they don't
Hmm.
want to be disrespectful. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
multiple different reasons of why we're doing the same behavior.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, I just think it's important also when I think about the Enneagram to point those types of things out.
That is, and especially in the typing process, this is where it can get really tricky. Is focusing too much on those behaviors, that behavior list, and so we'll talk about common tendencies, but you just have to be very careful about how we teach it. We have to be very careful and responsible, and then also careful with how you take that in when you're finding your type, because you may, to your point, be drinking water like somebody else and think, oh, it must be a type 1, but it's like, well, really, when I dig into it, it's because of this. So it makes it a little bit more tricky, but it also I think is reflective of the complexity of the human experience. So that makes sense that it wouldn't just be an an easy aha. Speaking of different uses of the Enneagram, I know that you went to a relationship
Yes.
session because so many people do take what they learn in our workshops and take it back home to their relationships. What was that session and what came out of that for you?
Yeah, I love that. So, it was Michelle Joy's developmental Enneagram for couples session. And so shout out to Michelle that she did it. I didn't get a chance to actually chat with her. Um, but it was a fantastic session. And for me, a takeaway, and I got vulnerable and personal in that session. Um, which is looking at how a lot of times we can come into a space and we are projecting the thing that we want and expecting people to meet those expectations. And what does that look like? And taking some time back to say, hey, am I really giving this person space to share what they need to share? Or am I just, here's the thing. Um, And I know sometimes, like I was sharing on a personal note, as someone who is neurodivergent, I can get stuck on words, right?
Mm,
So if you use a word for me, and especially absolutes, if you use the all,
always, never.
right? Always, never. When you use those terms, I get triggered, and I'm focusing now. Nothing else that you say matters because now I'm focused on this really like always. Is it really always? Like, does that never happen? Um, and so, understanding those again, having awareness to that and not using that as, oh, well, I'm neurodivergent, so you have to understand that if you say this, we're not going anywhere. I mean, that is a thing. And at the same time, I have to be aware that I have that. And so my work, my exercise is then to say, okay, what is it that, and I'm just going to use my wife as an example because in a couple of relationships, that's what it was. I was like, when my wife uses those absolutes, um, as people with strategy two and strategy ones tend to do, when they use those absolutes, looking past that and saying, okay, what's the message they're really trying to get out? Right. And I
Mm.
thought that was what Michelle was really kind of planning, saying, hey, are we really giving ourselves a chance to listen to what is it that they're really trying to say? Or are we finding these other things so that we don't have to be accountable for the thing that they're trying to bring up? Oh, so anyway, so that was just one thing that was personal for me. There was other things that folks that were there that were talking about that felt that it really hit for them to be, again, practical that you can take
Mm-hmm.
away. And that's what I love. There was so many of those that were that. So many things that you can walk in and say, okay, I know now how to take that 1 hour, and
Yeah.
now I have something that I can bring into my life to change the rest of my life versus, 1 hour to change your life. Really? Fantastic.
Well, and I've been to couples counseling in the past or couples therapy, and it is so helpful. And I always had wished that my therapist had known about the Enneagram because I think you were talking about the language earlier.
Yes.
So some sort, you just kind of like, okay, we can skip over all of this and we can kind of jump in right here now that you know I'm striving to feel excited, my partner's striving to feel connected. Okay, now let's talk about the issues. Um, and I just want to give Michelle as a resource to our listeners because she is it looks like a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has the Couples Institute, and now it looks like the Couples Institute Counseling Services. So it looks like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that she is doing both working directly with clients and then also working with other therapists to
Yes.
bring in the Enneagram to their practice.
Yep.
And I think that that's important to call out her credentials and experience because this is exactly why at Enneagram MBA, we're not talking about how to use this with your spouse. If you pick up some things that are interesting, by all means, but I'm not. This is not my lane, right? We have professional experience, so we're going to bring that into how we talk about the Enneagram. Michelle is has experience and the qualifications that it's like, okay, we let's talk about couples interactions and then infuse the Enneagram into that, and it being a very a legitimate resource because I know that there's others that you just kind of want to be careful about. So she is one that we would recommend reaching out to if you want to bring it to your relationships.
Yep, no, for sure. And since you did that, now you just put me in a spot where if I don't do this, I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna get in trouble. So because my wife is a therapist who uses the
Oh, okay. Well, that yes. Well, shout out. Yes,
who,
let's
who
plug
who
your
uses the
wife as well.
Enneagram in her practice. She doesn't teach, which I keep trying to get her to do, but she doesn't teach other therapists how to use it. They do contact her sometimes to talk about things. But yeah, she uses the Enneagram a lot in her practice here in Colorado. So Talia Dash.
I was like, well, let's link it up because I know we
Yep,
have
yep.
there's a
Oh,
big interest out in the Denver area, which is where. And does she do video remote? There is it just in
most of it's
Colorado?
interesting, yeah. So since COVID, I would say pretty much I would say 96% of her clients are, using, virtual.
Okay. And is she because I know with licensing, especially in therapy, it's like you have to have the state. Is
Yeah,
it
so
just in
she's right now
Colorado?
just like in Colorado, but a
Okay.
whole different conversation that she and I have been having because I hear in that space they're opening up ways for therapists to be because mental health is so important right
Yes.
now. They're opening up ways for therapists to be able to do work in other states because there's just not enough therapists in this country for the level where mental health is unfortunately going.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's something that's coming.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll link her website or the best way to contact her in the show notes here. In addition to Michelle, who I think for those listeners who are therapists or relationship coaches, she would be a great resource for now to look at how can I infuse the Enneagram into that.
Yep.
Any other insights that you are taking from the conference that you'll be applying to either your own personal development or the work that you do with the Enneagram?
Yeah. For me, I guess there's a couple. Uh, really quick, I want to give a shout out to all the ATA alum that were there.
So
Because
awareness to action, which is
yeah,
the awareness to action Enneagram,
yep. So
ATA,
so all
yes.
the alum that were there that I got to hang out with, it was fantastic. Also got to meet Milton Stewart, who is the president-elect for the IEA. So very, very cool person to interact with and meet. And then to your question, what I'm taking away, which what I love, of course, being a student of the ATA, I love that space. And at the same time, I am not just a student of the ATA, I'm a student of the Enneagram. And being a student of the Enneagram, one of the things, and I talk about a lot about inclusion and how um, diverse things were. And when I talk about diversity, it is very easy to go to the, race and gender, right? But when I talk about diversity, I've been talking about the modalities that were there and what that looks like. And for me, someone who, again, is a student of the Enneagram, is to look at all the different ways of how to use the Enneagram to help folks. And so that's what really got me jazzed and juiced up
Mm-hmm.
after leaving that conference is seeing that, I want to meet people when I'm working with folks, when I'm working with teams, I want to be able to meet them where they are. And I want to be able, it's like learning a different language. I want to be able to speak their language.
Yeah.
and meet them with what they know about. And so um, seeing folks doing that and then understanding how I operate, um, that's what I really took away and was really jazzed about was like, yeah, I love this foundation. Um, and I want to be able to build upon that and be able to um not be everything to everybody, knowing who I am, knowing how I do this work, and at the same time, I can speak the language,
Mhm.
right? I can communicate with folks and help them um using this tool to get to wherever it is that they're trying to get to. And then if I get to a space where I'm like, ooh, that's out of my lane, also knowing, I networking and being able to know who I can pass that baton to. Okay. Be like, yeah, that is not me. So let me introduce you to X, or you may want to
Mhm.
look at X, the same way that we're just doing like, hey, if you want to learn this, look at this person, right? Because we are not going to be everything to everybody. But at the same time, I want to be able to communicate um, with I do want to communicate with any and everybody when I can.
Yeah. And even though I am very team awareness to action and the way that we teach it, most of the time we don't have years with a client. I mean, at best, it's 3 or 4 months most of the time. Typically, it's sometimes it's even just 2 hours, and so I love the way that awareness to action, the way that they approach it. It makes it easy to be able to share. But that's not to say that once you get into it, or even just for your personal life, that some of these other teachers don't also have wonderful approaches and nuggets that you can pick up. One of my favorite books was, I think it was The Journey to Wholeness by Suzanne Stabile. And
Sure.
she talks a lot about stances, which I know Awareness to Action doesn't, but I really love that book and I still recommend that book. Um, and oh my gosh, I just lost my thought talking about other approaches. Oh, I also wanted to give. We were talking about them before we hit play or record. The Fathoms podcast.
Yes.
They have done. Oh my gosh, such a robust. I think is understating it, but that's a robust look at 3 or 4 different approaches to the Enneagram. And it's just a wonderful season. So if you are really feeling the Enneagram, for those fellow Enneagram enthusiasts, I would recommend checking out their latest season on the Fathoms, where they dive into the different approaches. And then they do kind of this is how this approach talks about a 7. This is how this approach talks about a 7. This is how this approach talks about instincts. So you really get a deep look into the different ways that people talk and use the Enneagram.
Yep. Yep. So shout out to Seth, Lindsay, and Creek. Uh,
Yes.
I also got to hang out with them for a bit, so that was cool. So
I
thank you
mean,
for
and
bringing.
they are also part of the ATA community, so
Yo,
Awareness to
yeah,
Action
yeah. That
community.
that was my way in the beginning to say all those folks, but then since you brought up Fallon's, I'm like, well, now I get to shout them out. Just
Well,
to,
I have talked a lot about their podcast. I mean, you got to be, interested in the Enneagram, but it is interesting for people who are like, what's the difference? What's this? What's this? It's a wonderful look at that, and very very robust. I know they put a ton of work into that season.
yep, yep, no, and they were again, they were there at the conference, and they even had a whole thing of where you could sign up and kind of share your thoughts about what was happening with the conference. So
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, so that's probably gonna be an episode if it's not already, if it hasn't already come out, because I'm
Okay.
behind and all that because I it's been travel, travel, travel for me since then. So, but
Okay.
yeah,
Well, plugging the Fathoms Enneagram podcast. Is there anything else? I know we've kind of covered all kinds of random things, but as we start to wrap up, is there anything else that you definitely want to leave our listeners with, either as a really interesting takeaway, just kind of where you see the Enneagram going, a funny story, another interaction that you had with somebody that you think we would enjoy? Anything else you want to share with us that would kind of make this conversation feel complete?
I think for me, what I would probably leave, right, become is, and this is probably, it's about the conference, and it's also, I think, about the Enneagram as a whole, which is, it's not about just learning it, but it's about living it, right? How
Mm.
do you actually take what what you're learning, whether you're reading, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a, a workshop or a school, whatever it is, are you really bringing it in and doing the work? And I know we've I know I'm maybe we might want to go back to Mario and be like, you know what, you're gonna have to pay us because we've shared your name
Yeah. We need to be
so many
paid
times.
spokespeople. Yes.
Right. But with that, right, it is that maybe that same thing of Mario's first book and his school's name, which is awareness to action. Like, are you living it, or are you actually putting those things in action? And I think that's another reason that I gravitated to that school first, from a certification standpoint, which is that's always been my mentality. Like, if I'm not doing anything with it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the way I would like to end this, is to share with folks, is that learning it is great, but then taking some things and actually saying, okay, how can I apply this? How can I apply it? How can I actually do something with it? Um, and I will say, to give us a plug, Sarah, is I think that's how we try to approach the work that we do, right? Is to make sure that we're giving folks something that they can truly take nuggets and apply it, so that it's there's ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to a business, it's ROI.
Yeah.
You're going to get a return on investment, but you have to be willing to put that work in. It's
Yeah.
not magic, right? It's not fairy dust. It's practical, if you use it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awareness is a necessary first step. You cannot skip over it, but
Right.
also it just cannot stop there. And
That's a starting point.
so it's a starting point, and that emotional intelligence is made up that of that self-awareness and the other's awareness, and then you get into self-development and relationship development. That's where that action happens. So, yeah, I mean that is, yeah, well said. I'll just say well said. Well, I'm excited to be talking with you today for listeners to kind of get a sneak peek who probably weren't there at the conference. And if you happen to be there, hopefully some good memories got jogged. If you had any additional insights that you want us to share in a future episode, please reach out, enneagrammba.com /contact. And then you'll probably be hearing from Dee again in the future. We're going to be working on some other interesting podcast topics and make it a little bit more conversational. So looking forward to
Hey,
that.
Sarah,
I think you want to say something else. Yeah.
you can see it on my face, right? Because
Yeah, I can see it.
I just thought about, well, because if someone, if you want to plug really quickly, I went to this session and I love this session. And again, as someone who is neurodivergent, this person is doing a lot of work in the neuroscience space.
Okay.
So Tang Hyong,
Oh,
um,
yes. Okay.
and this book right here, because I'm
Pull it back just a little bit for YouTube. It's like it's white. It's really white. It's might be too bright. What's the book called for listeners?
making team dynamics visible.
Okay.
Um, you know, I some of my leadership work is touches in the neuroscience space. Um, and so just looking at, for me, integrating Enneagram with neuroscience, um, I think again is something that's awesome. And again, showing that it is so versatile of this work. So anyway,
I'm
I just
glad you brought that up. That may be an interesting topic, or maybe an interesting guest to get on the show. Because what I have found, I mean, so many people will talk about their, being neurodivergent. Typically, I hear it from the perspective of I'm ADHD, and then people always think, oh, well, I'm ADHD. I must be a 7. I can't focus. But it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. There's so much more, number one. And that also does kind of flavor, again, the typing process, because you may not see the way that you present a type 3, for example, in a lot of the typical Enneagram literature. So I love having a resource for somebody who is studying that, and talking more about that. So we'll definitely link that, and that may be a fun kind of co-interview we get, since you kind of have the end now. So we'll see. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a great final thought. Any other final thoughts before
nope,
we call it
sorry,
complete? No,
I,
that was a good one. That was such a good
yeah,
one.
no,
That
she was very impactful and again very engaging. And so yeah, so I definitely had to bring her up. Her session was awesome.
Okay, I'm glad you brought her up. I'm glad you said that. And with that, we'll close it out. I appreciate you being here, sharing. Well, it sounds like we'll probably be seeing you back here soon. Listeners, as always, thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.